I'm Basi Beis. We're towards the beginning of Ois Daled. So the Nekuda that we're learning about over here is the pshat of Oir Ein Sof, Lamato Ad Ein Tachlis. So he says that the meaning of Lamato Ad Ein Tachlis is that not only the Oir itself is Ein Sof, but because the Oir is Ein Sof, so therefore the Eilemis and the Spheres that are created from Ein Sof are also Ein Sof. And the Rebbe adds to that, and it says that when it says here Ein Sof, it doesn't mean Stam Ein Sof. It means Ein Sof of Bli Gvul Ha'amiti, if you remember. That's what it says here. The Bli Gvul Ha'amiti is there also in the spheres that are created from Ein Sof. So just again to remind you what this concept of Bli Gvul Ha'amiti means. Earlier, in other words, there's Bli Gvul, and there's Bli Gvul that's not Bli Gvul Ha'amiti. What does that mean? Either it's Bli Gvul or it's not Bli Gvul. Earlier in the Maimif, so there's a lot of dargis in this. There's Bli Gvul dargis of Bli Gvul. So, just to point out a few things. Earlier in the Maimif, we had a vart that it brings from the Rama that you have nevroyim that are nitzchiyim berotzen habayre. Those things that are nitzchiyim berotzen habayre, that's not the real Bli Gvul. For example, Chassidus brings that the tzva shamayim achazokim keyoyim hibaram. You see that the sun, the moon, and all the other tzva shamayim that exist remain with their same strength keyoyim hibaram, and they have a koyach of nitzchiyus in them. They don't get weaker through time. They don't change like it is over here in tzva ha'aretz, the way things exist here in the world below, where nature of things is to keep on getting weaker and weaker. So that's the inyan of nitzchiyus that's in them. That's not the real inyan of nitzchiyus at all. These are nevrayim. These are limited nevrayim. The ratzon habayra is that they should remain nitzchiyus. What does the nitzchiyus express itself in over here? In time. That it goes another minute, it continues going, and it doesn't get weaker. Nitzchiyus that's expressed in the hagbala of zman is not the emes inyan of nitzchiyus. The emes inyan of nitzchiyus is where zman is not teifus makim in the first place. There's no mitzias of zman b'chlal. And it's not a koyach of nitzchiyus berotzen habayra. It's be'etzem completely Bli Gvul. Then there's even deeper than that. When the Rebbe here says Bli Gvul ha'amiti, you have Bli Gvul which is coming to describe something. There's a certain mitzias, and the greatness of this mitzias is that it's so powerful and that it's unlimited. But you're talking about a certain mitzias that exists. That the Bli Gvul is a description of something specific. The emes of Bli Gvul ha'amiti, when we talk about it like Rabbi the Eibishter himself, what does Bli Gvul mean? Bli Gvul means that he has no description whatsoever. That's what Bli Gvul means. Bli Gvul is not coming to describe greatness. Adarabah. Bli Gvul is coming to say he has no description whatsoever. Or in the lashon that we had before, that Rabbi will be speaking about now, is the concept of achtus pshuta. Achtus pshuta is where there's no description, there's no madreges, there's no maila, there's no mata. It's a completely different type of Bli Gvul. Yeah, there's a Bli Gvul which is coming to describe something, that this is so powerful that it never ends. Then there's a Bli Gvul, it's not coming to describe anything. Adarabah, the Eibishter himself is a bilti mitzias nimtza. His existence is in a completely different type of way than when we know it. He exists be'etzem. That's what Bli Gvul means. It's a completely different type of Bli Gvul. Okay, we'll leave it at that. So the Rebbe is saying here, the chiddush is that this Bli Gvul ha'amiti comes out in Oyer, and that Bli Gvul ha'amiti, it could also be recognized even in the spheres that come from the Oyer, the spheres en kates, or Eilemis en kates. Okay, let's continue inside. Sorry. So the Friedrich Rebbe begins explaining this inyan. Where do you see this on the highest level, that the Bli Gvul ha'amiti, that there is in the Oyer, because the Oyer is me'ena moir, so just like the moir itself is Bli Gvul ha'amiti, so the Oyer is also Bli Gvul ha'amiti, and this Bli Gvul ha'amiti is seen also in the spashtus of the Oyer. In Oyer, there's two dargis. Chassidus always speaks about the fact there's the etzem of the Oyer, and there's the spashtus of the Oyer. When we're talking here about the fact that the Oyer has the Bli Gvul in it, the chiddush is that even in the spashtus of the Oyer, and the Oyer is mispashet endlessly, that hispashtus of the Oyer has in it the koyach of bli gvul amiti. Where do you see this? So maybe al zeh maimah there is utra. So he brings what it says in the Zohar. Kahai butzine, like you have with a candle. The spashit l'chol star v'iber, that it shines to every direction. Because tistakel minda loin, when you look to see what it is, like tishtakach ala butzine b'luchadai, you'll see that all it is one candle. That's the mashal. What is this mashal coming to say? What's the chiddush of this mashal? So the Rabbi says, even though the light of this candle spreads to every single side. What does that mean? What's the nimshal of this? That refers to the fact that we have an espashtus of this air that's unlimited. The espashtus of bli gvul. Okay, so in the hemshach of the Maimah here, 1 second, is the Rabbi bring the Lashon here? Yeah, so this is the fact that it's mispashet to every single side is the inyan of hispashtus bli gvul. In other words, it's on every single level, every single place. It's a ribui, bli gvul. What is the concept of bli gvul? What's a simple way of translating the concept of bli gvul? When you have something that has a limited hispashtus, so then the hispashtus has a schala, has an end, and you could say exactly which level it began and which level it ended. When something is mispashet bli gvul, it goes endlessly, so then it's a ribui bli gvul. On a sheer hispashtus. We're talking about hispashtus outside the source of the oil over here. Hispashtus away from the oil. Hispashtus into every single level of olamis and into every single level that exists. There's a ribui bli gvul. That's the concept of hispashit l'chol setar v'iber. Okay. But harela mitosai hu betzina b'luchadai. What is the truth over here regarding this oil? That it's just one candle that's here. Shubchinas chad. It's one. It's not mispashet bli gvul. Hispashtus bli gvul means that it goes into a ribui levels, into a ribui places, bli gvul places. Just like star v'ibar, begashmis, the candle reaches to the four different sides and to l'mayla, l'mata, and mizrach and ma'ariv are stira. Either it's going to mizrach or it's going to ma'ariv. No, it goes to both. Sai mizrach, sai ma'ariv, ma'ila, mata, to all over. Right, so same thing also beruchnius. The l'chol star v'ibar refers to the fact that it's mispashit in the ribui levels bli gvul. But that's not what the essence of the candle is. The essence of the candle is one, chad, not that there's a ribui dargis that it reaches. The etzema oir, what is the etzema oir? It's just one candle that's pshitus.
The candle is oir, the candle is ma'or.
I know, I'm using the lashon because that's what it says in Chassidus. You're right. But pashtus, the mashal that he's saying over here, the candle would be the ma'or, and the light that comes out of it is the oir. But in Chassidus, when it brings this mashal, it brings it as the nimshal of this. It's only a mashal. The nimshal, the way Chassidus explains this is, we're talking about the etzema oir and the spashtus oir. When you look at the candle itself, there's two parts to the candle itself. Just like the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe speaks about the shemesh itself. There is the brightness that's nichlal in the shemesh, before it comes out of the shemesh, and then there's the brightness that's mispashit from the shemesh. Right? So when you look at a candle itself, it could either be the mashal of a ma'ir, which is the source of the light, or it could be a mashal for the etzema oir before it's mispashit away from the light. Those are the two things. So Chassidus brings us as a mashal of etzema oir and the ispashtus of the oir. Okay. Yeah. Okay, now, when you learn what it says up until here, so Bepashtus, what is he saying? There's two different things. There's the Spashtus of the Oir, and there's the Etzem Oir itself. There's a big difference between them. The Spashtus of the Oir, what's the strength of this Oir? That it's bli gvul hispashtus, that it goes in a ribui levels without a shear. What's with the Etzem of the Oir? There's no ribui there whatsoever. In the Etzem Oir, it's just in the presence of the source of the candle itself. There are no levels there. So over there, it's chad, it's one, just the etzem oir, right? Elamai, the source of the hispashtus of the oir, the fact that there's this ribui comes from this chad, from this etzem oir, which is the candle itself, that has no levels whatsoever. But the Rebbe continues and says, no, it's much deeper than that. The real chiddush over here is that there's two opposites here. The source of the oir, which is the etzem oir that's one, Ba'ofen shel achtus upshitus be'etzem. And when we say chad, what does chad mean? That it's achtus and pshitus. Just two different things. It's one and it's simplicity. There's no definitions to it whatsoever. And be'etzem. It's in essence completely removed of any levels whatsoever. Be'etzem as opposed to b'poyel. It's not just that b'poyel, it's able to be in every level, and therefore all these levels are not teifes mokim. Sometimes you have something which has a shaykhis to different levels, but it doesn't get defined by those levels, it doesn't get mugbal by a certain level, so therefore it's able to be here, it's able to be there, it's able to be every... No, it's be'etzem. It has no shaykhis b'chalal to any levels whatsoever. Like the candle itself. The candle itself has any shaykhis to Mizrach or to Ma'ariv, to Tzaf and to Darim. The candle is going to extend to all these places. But yet the candle itself has no shaykhis to anything. So that's the pshitus of the Etzem Ha'or. Harehu mispashet l'chol star v'iber. It is mispashet to every side. When it says who, this is the key. See, you read this mime, it's not clear. But when it says who, what does who mean? Who means that this achtus and pshitus be'etzem is what's being mispashet l'chol star v'iber. That's what the who goes on. That's saying that very same pshitus is what's in the riboy of bligvul. Understand what I'm trying to say? Right. In other words, the point that Rebbe is being b'chadash here is, it says this in the Metzainer to the Maimonim, that the Rebbe Rashab speaks about this, but Pashtos, the riboy and the achtus pshuta are opposites. Right? The whole meaning of the riboy is that there's many different levels. It's mispashet to Mizrach, to Ma'ariv, and all the bligvul levels. And achtus, which is pshitus be'etzem, means that it's one. That there are no levels b'chlal. So b'pashtus, the riboy and the achtus pshuta are not only not the same, they're mamish hofchim. That's the lashon of the Rebbe, shnei hofchim. So you would say that what happens to this candle sort of goes through a transformation. In its source, it's just achtus and pshitus. When the oil leaves its source, so what happens? So now the achtus of this candle gets diminished, it gets changed, and now it's a riboy, and it's... But is that what really happens? That's not what happens, though. That's not the truth. Why is there this riboy in the oil that comes out of the candle? Why take is this oil that comes out of the candle bligvul, that is l'chol star v'iber? V'derech klal, so this is going back to the point that we learned before about ashpa. V'derech klal, when you have ashpa that leaves a source and comes out to another place, so it has to go through a certain change. And where does that change begin? The change begins in the source itself. Just like by every mashpia, so the mashpia himself is on a level where he's removed of the ashpa, and then he has to define himself and come down with a specific ashpa that's going to come out from the source and go to a different place. That's how every ashpa works. So usually when you have ashpa that comes from the source, there's a yirid in the source, and then when there's the ashpa that comes out, that hashpa is something that's very specific and defined. That's b'derech klal. How is it that over here, this oil that comes out from the source is l'chol star v'iber, it's bligvul, it's mispashet bligvul, and it can't be defined in any way. It's because it's the achtus pshuta itself that remains as is. Not the achtus pshuta is not changing. The achtus pshuta remains with its full achtus pshuta unchanged, and that oir comes out b'derech oir, not b'derech hashpa. It comes out b'derech memela. Because it comes out b'derech memela, so that koyach of the achtus pshuta is reflected in the oir by what? By the fact that there's a riboy. So what's this riboy? This riboy is a stira to the achtus pshuta? No, punkt vakar. The riboy is actually a reflection of the achtus pshuta. Yes, the achtus pshuta has no shaykhs be'etzem to any of these levels. So even on the oir that does come out to the levels, it also won't be limited to any levels. It's going to go on every single level. So therefore, it's not a stira. Okay, so but the Rebbe is trying to say is it's not. There's 2 points over here. One point is that the riboy is not a stira to the achtus pshuta. That's one point. Another point is it's even deeper than that. The riboy is mamish a reflection of the achtus pshuta. That's what the essence of the riboy is. You can, on one hand, you can come and say the riboy and achtus pshuta are really 2 different things. Elamai, the riboy is not a stira to the achtus pshuta, it comes from the achtus pshuta. What the Rebbe is trying to say over here is the shnei hofchim, harehu mispashet l'chol star v'iber, means the very achtus pshuta itself is what the essence of the riboy is. When you see that this riboy could be on every single level, the reason why it could be on every single level is because that's saying that it's not shaykh to any level. So it is the achtus pshuta. That's the vart of here. Now, this is also in Chassidus, this concept, what are we talking about over here? We're talking about Spheris and Kates. That's what we're talking about. In Chassidus it says that before there are Spheris, which are Spheris, there are Spheris and Kates. And in Zohar, this is the marker for the concept of Spheris and Kates. The whole star v'ibur. When you have Spheris that are defined, that there's a Chachmeh, there's a Chesed, and so on, so then it's on a specific level and it has a specific definition of what it is, that's a Gilui that has already a certain Gvul in it. It has a certain limitation. That it doesn't come out like that naturally from the source. Over there had to be a tzimtzum, or the lashon that Chassidus uses is there's an aliyas haratzon, where the Eibishter decided that there should be a gvul, and therefore there's a koyach hagvul, and that koyach hagvul is revealed through tzimtzum, and therefore from this comes out 10 spheres. But without any tzimtzum, without any koyach hagvul, mitzad the source itself, the way the ashpah comes out from the Eibishter, so the oir comes out. There's a hispashtus of her, there's a gilui from the Eibishter, but what's that gilui? That gilui is going to be with spheres and kates. It goes on every single level, bli gvul. Why? Because the source itself is achtas pshuta. So there's no 10, it can't be defined in any way. It's a completely different type of spheres than the Indian of spheres of Esa spheres. Okay, let's continue inside. Mamshech Levaye, Friediger Rebbe continues to explain, Shezeu Mashakasav Pasach Alayo. This concept of the spheres and kates is the taich of what it says in Pasach Alayo. Antu chad v'lo b'chushban. The beginning of Pasach Alayo, the very first thing we say is that the Eibishter is chad and v'lo b'chushban. He cannot be counted, it cannot be calculated. So what is this referring to? So when it says here Antu chad, it refers to the etzem ha'or, and when it says v'lo b'chushban refers to the hispashtus of the ha'or. And that even though there is already a espashtus, but that espashtus is v'lo b'chushban, it's a ribui v'lo b'chushban. Right, so this is the idea that we just spoke about is what he's saying here. But the Rebbe is going to give a hagdam over here to explain the pshat of antu chad v'lo b'chushban, that there's two pshatim in this, and then we'll come back. The Rebbe is going to prove this pshat here. Let's see. Shagam in yinzeh. So this lashon of antu chad v'lo b'chushban. It refers to the greatness of the Eibishter, that there is an Oir Ein Sof. That's what it's talking about. The Mittler Rebbe explains in Teres Chaim that over here in Pasach Alayo he goes through all the levels that there is L'mayla. It starts with Antu Chad V'lo B'chushban and goes on and on. So that the Mittler Rebbe over there, it's like 30 pages. He goes through the whole beginning of Pasach Alayo, and he explains each statement, what it refers to. It's not just a repetition of the same things. It's each thing is talking about a whole different level, right? It says first it says Antu Chad V'lo B'chushban, then Antu Yilah Kol Yilah Simla Kol Simla Les B'Chshav Tzvei Klal. Then it starts again Antu Da Pikas Astar Tikunin. He goes through. It's mamish unbelievable. He explains every single level what it's referring to. So the beginning is Antu Chad V'lo B'chushban. So what is this talking about? So, as I said, first the Rebbe is going to bring the pshat that's not speaking about Spheris and Kates. And then the Rebbe will prove that you have to say that it is going on Spheris and Kates. So, Omaschel Madarga Yisrael Yaina. So when we begin in Pasach Alayo, we start with the highest level. Shazeh Omer Antu Chad V'lo B'chushban. That the essence of the Eir itself is Chad, and there's no cheshbon over there whatsoever. So what's the simple pshat of v'lo b'chushban? I pointed this out when we were learning the Friediger Rebbe's Maimer. The simple pshat of v'lo b'chushban is that it's going on the ant. He's saying about the ant two things. Ant hu chad, and that ant which is chad is also because it's chad, therefore it's v'lo b'chushban. So that's the simple pshat that the Rebbe brings here. Ant hu chad koyal achtas apshuta. It refers to the simple unity of the Eibishter himself above any levels whatsoever. And v'lo b'chushban hainu she'ein begeder cheshbon klal. When it says v'lo b'chushban, it doesn't mean that it's not shayach to a cheshbon b'poyel, but it means it's not even begeder cheshbon. It doesn't come b'chlal into that realm of existence. It's not shayach b'chlal cheshbon. I said before that it's not pshat that it's chad and it has a shaychus to any levels, and because it doesn't get caught up by these levels, so it could be on every level. It's not shayach b'chlal to any level. It's not begeder cheshbon. The chad is above the whole union of spheres. So here we're talking about the etzem ha'or, which is even higher than spheres and kates. So we can divide this into three levels. There's much more than this, but just to understand what it says here. There's the etzem ha'or, where there's no union of spheres at all. Then there's the or, where there's a spheres and kates. And then there's the darga of Oyer, where there's the Aliyas Haratzin, where there's a union of Gvul, there's a union of Spheres, of 10 spheres. Okay, so Bepashtus, when it says Antu Chad V'lo B'Choshban, what is it referring to? The Etzem Ha'Oyer, which is Chad, and it's not Beged Cheshbon. When it says it's not Beged Cheshbon, it means it's not in the Cheshbon of 10 spheres, it's not even in the Cheshbon of Spheres and Kates either. Even Spheres and Kates, on some level, some soil level, has Epis HaShayches to 10 spheres. There's 10 spheres and then the Spheres and Kates, although they're very, very different from one another. They are, on the one hand, they're mamish completely different types of spheres. It's not defined whatsoever, Spheres and Kates. But yet, sof, this is Spheres and this is Spheres. Antu Chad V'lo B'Chushban means the Eibishter himself is V'lo B'Chushban of any Spheres whatsoever. That's Bepashtus the Taish.
What were the other two?
Again. There's the Etzem Ha'Oyer, the Spheres and Kates, when you have Spheres but without an end, and then you have the 10 spheres.
How come you say Eibishter any of those?
What do you mean? Again, we're not talking about Atzmus over here. We're not talking about the very essence of the Eibishter himself. Pashtus, when in Pasach Aliyah, when he starts Antu Chad,
Who is Ant?
it's talking about the Etzem Ha'Oyer. That's the Taich over here. I could only repeat what it says in the Heilige Svarim. I mean, I'll try not to make up things.
Etzem means the Mar or the
The Etzem Ha'Oyer, the Etzem of the Oyer, not the Ma'ir. Okay, let's continue. But Dr. Rabbi, where are we over here?
The or is within the or? So
What?
it's like the or
The Etzem Ha'Oyer in the Ma'ir, before there's any Ispashtus out of the source. Yeah. However, we must say, we must say that from this Achtus Apshuta of the Etzem Ha'Oyer, that's the source of the creation of the Ribuy Anivroim. As the Mittler Rebbe explains in Teres Chaim. This line that I just read, I heard the tape of the Maimer that Rebbe didn't say it. Okay, but I'll just touch what he's saying over here. That he's going back to the point that we said before. That we say, Antu Chad V'lo B'Chushban, even though B'Pashtos, it refers to the Etzem Ha'Oyer before this Pashtos. And that's what's V'lo B'Chushban. What happens once you come down to the level of a Spashtos, where there is a Spashtos of Spheres and Kates, or even Eilim and Kates? Over there it's not Chad V'lo B'Chushban. Over there is a certain, it doesn't have that same kind of a Pshitus. But what did we explain before? No, that the emes is even the fact that you have in the Hispashtos, all this ribuy that it goes on all these levels, ein soif. Why is it? Why doesn't it get limited to one level or another? It's because it's a reflection of the Antu Chad. That's really pshitus, the way it comes out into the Hispashtos. So when you see ribuy nivrayim, we really must say that that's also v'lo b'chushban. So therefore, what's the pshat of Antu Chad v'lo b'chushban? The v'lo b'chushban does not go only on the Etzem Ha'Oyer, but it's you have to read it with a comma. Antu Chad, referring to the Etzem Ha'Oyer. And then even the Hispashtos of the Oyer is also v'lo b'chushban. That's what the Rebbe is trying to say here. Now, the Rebbe is going to, in the Hemshech Inyan, explain this and bring another raya to this. Okay, we'll leave it for tomorrow. We're learning the Maimer Basi Legani Tavshin Chav Beis. We're in the middle of Siv Daled, in the paragraph of Mascha Levayer. Let's start from where it says Mamshech Levayer. In the middle of that paragraph, Mamshech Levayer Shezeh Mashkasa B'Pasach Eliyahu. I think we might have read this already, a few lines here, but we'll read it again.
Where are you?
Mamshech Levayer, the last word on the line. Mamshech Levayer. Okay, so the Rabbi here is talking about Spheres and Kates. That's the theme. It says in the Idrizute that there's a candle that shines to all sides. And if you look to see what this candle is, you'll see that it's Chad. It's just one candle. And the Rebbe explained that this is the union of Spheres and Kates, which means that you have the Spashtos of the Sphere to a Ribuy levels, Bligvul levels. And that Ribuy of the Bligvul that comes out from the candle, what is it in essence? It's all Achtas Pshuta. It's the simple unity of the Eibishter himself. And because this is simple unity, so therefore when it comes out on the Ribuy levels, what is it really? What is this Ribuy, this Bligvul that comes out? It's not many, it's not a multitude of levels. All that multitude of levels that you see are really just a reflection of the Achtas Pshuta of the Eibishter. Okay, let's continue inside. Mamshech Levayer continues to explain in the Maimer and Basi Legani, Sheseo Masha Kosev B'Pasach Eliyahu Antu Chad V'lo B'Chushban. So this is what it means when we say that the Eibishter is Chad V'lo B'Chushban, cannot be calculated or counted. So when we say that the Eibishter is chad and he can't be calculated, it refers to the highest level in Oyer. As the Mittler Rebbe explains, that here, in this statement of Pasach Eliyahu, he goes through many levels. He starts with the highest level, beginning with the highest level, which is the opening statement of Antuchad v'lo b'chushban. When it says Antuchad, it refers to the simple unity of the Etzem Ha'or before there is any spheres whatsoever. Achtas Pshuta. V'loi b'cheshbon, so according to this, or v'loi b'chushban, according to this pshat, when you say v'loi b'chushban, what does v'loi b'chushban mean? Hainu she'eina begeder cheshbon klal. On this level, it's not b'chlal begeder. It's not at all in that realm of reality where there is any cheshbon to be made. So v'lo b'chushban doesn't mean that he's above cheshbon, that you can't count. When you have something that's unlimited, so you can't count. There's a multitude of levels, endless levels, so you can't count. That's not the taich of v'lo b'chushban. If that's what v'lo b'chushban would mean, so then the taich is v'lo b'chushban, that b'payil you can't count it because there's so many. But the Rebbe is saying here in Achtas Pshuta, why is it v'lo b'chushban? Because it's on such a level where there is no definition b'chlal. It's Achtas Pshuta. On a level of Achtas Pshuta, there's nothing in the first place to think of counting b'chlal. It's not shaykh b'chlal to the concept of counting any levels. It's Achtas Pshuta. Because the Eibishter is completely above any concept of spheres, which means not only spheres, where you have 10 spheres, but even when you have spheres en kates, endless numbers of spheres, even above that concept of spheres. Achtus Pshuta is with no expression of any spheres whatsoever, and so therefore when it says v'lo b'chushban, it means that he's higher than geder chushban. That's the pshat of Antuchad v'lo b'chushban. Now what comes out according to this pshat? So how about when there are spheres? When there is an Oyer that comes out on a level of spheres, even if it's not 10 spheres, but when there's any kinds of spheres, even spheres and kates, so over there, that chad, which exists in the source, is not already there anymore. Antuchad v'lo b'chushban is a description of the etzem of the Oyer before there's any spheres. But once it comes out to the ribui level of ispashtus of the Oyer in the bli gvul levels, so over there you can't say v'lo b'chushban. Over there is a certain shaykhis to cheshbon. V'haraya, it's mispasha to multitude of levels. How can you say it's not begeder cheshbon if there's multitude, if there's bligvul levels? Bligvul levels means that the musig of various different levels exists there. Elamai, it's bligvul. So this is the first pshat, which says that there's sort of two different things. There's the chad, and on that goes the v'lo b'chushban. But once you come out from that chad, there it is shaykh to cheshbon. It continues, we must say, what we must say, which is the point that the Rebbe said before, that the pshat here is not that once it comes out and there are many levels, so then that sort of steps away from the source of the Achtas Pshuta. No, we must say that from the Achtas Pshuta, that is the source of the Ribu Nivraim. When we see the Ribu Nivraim, it's not the pshat that these Ribu Nivraim is something that is different than the Achtas Pshuta. The Achtas Pshuta remains in a source, and the Ribu Nivraim comes out in a place where there are many levels. No. The Achtas Pshuta in itself is the cause for the Ribu Nivraim, for these Ribu Spheres that come out. Memela, what is the Ribu Nivraim and the Ribu Spheres in essence? This is a reflection of the Achtas Pshuta. There's the Achtas Pshuta in the source, and there's the Achtas Pshuta when it comes out to the Ribu Nivraim or the Ribu Spheres. But it's really one and the same thing. That's what we must say. As it's explained in Teres Chaim. This is also understood. From this that we brought before, from the Alter Rebbe, Nigeres HaKadosh. When there's a creation, he may Eirin Seif, it comes from Eirin Seif. Why from Eirin Seif? Because the Eir is like the Moir itself. This is the essence of the Eibishter himself that creates. He exists on his own. He's not caused, he's not brought into being by anything. He exists be'etzem. He is. So that's what it says regarding the creation of Yesh Me'ayin. That in order to create Yesh Me'ayin, this comes only from the essence of the Eibishter himself. So the Rebbe now says, Ve'im kain, if that's true, thank you very much. If that's true, b'nigeya tu yesh ma'ayin, v'im kain, ribuy hanevraim, similar we could say regarding the many multitude of creations, hu dafkim, himakim kizeh, sheshamu achtas hapshuta. It comes from a level where there's achtas pshuta. Shesham ein le'ilu v'sibah shekotn lechas v'shalom. And over there, on that level, the Eibishter exists without any cause, without anything bringing him into being. Okay. Now, this kata in the Maimah is the pashtus very hard to understand. What's the Rebbe saying here? We're talking here about Sfiras Ein Kates. Or, in the words of the Maimah, we're talking about Achtas Pshuta, where there is no Sfiras whatsoever, versus a level of Ribuy Sfiras, where there's a multitude of levels of Sfiras. That's the theme of this sif over here. And the Rebbe brings in what it says from Yigeres HaKadosh, where the Alter Rebbe speaks about the Hesavas of Yesh Mayim, of creation of Yesh Mayim. Yishlachayda is a completely different inyan than Sfiras Ein Kates. We're talking about the fact that there's a yesh that's created, me'ayin, and what kind of oifen is the yesh created? That the yesh does not need any ilah v'siba, that it doesn't feel that there's any ilah v'siba that's creating it. Just like the Eibishter himself exists without any ilah v'siba causing him to come into being, because he exists be'etzem. He doesn't exist because someone made him be. He be'etzem exists. It's a completely different type of existence. So too, b'negei to yesh ma'ayin, it's created in such a oifen that you don't see any ilu v'siba for this yesh. How could something be created in such a oifen? Only the Eibishter himself, which ain't ilu v'siba shekadmalai. Right? That was the point about what the Alter Rebbe says in Yigeres HaKadosh. What's the connection of that inyan to what we're speaking about over here? B'negei to the concept of achtos pshuta and ribuy. Where there's two totally different inyanim l'chayda. How's the Rebbe tying in this Yigeres HaKadosh to the inyan of Sfiras Ein Kates? So I'm not 100% sure what's pshat over here, but it looks like what the Rebbe is trying to say is that in order to explain how it is that even in the Ribuy Gufe, that this Ribuy is Achtas Pshuta. So the Lashon that the Rebbe used earlier in the Maimer, that this is Shnei Hafachim. This is a point of, there's two opposites over here. If you're talking about the Ribuy, that there's many, there's a multitude, there's Bli Gvul, and you're telling me that what is this Ribuy Gufa? This Ribuy is really just an expression of Achtas Pshuta. You have the Achtas Pshuta that's present and it's expressed within the very Ribuy itself. That's a tremendous chiddush. Bepashtus, Ribuy and Achtas Pshuta are two hafchim. Achtas Pshuta means that there are no levels whatsoever, even not Bligvul. There isn't even any expression of Bligvul B'chlal. It's just Achtas Pshuta. And then you have the Bligvul levels that come out once there's a Hispashtus of the air, the Sfiras of Ein Kates. The Chiddush that this Maimer is saying over here is that the Achtus Pshuta of the Eibishter could be seen in the Ribuy itself. What is the truth of this Ribuy? The fact that it could be on every single level. So you have over here, ask a question. How is it that you have a Gilui that's not limited to one level? Why could it come from one level, another level, and it could be in every single level? That Ribuy could exist on every single level. What's the answer? Because something that doesn't get affected by any particular level, doesn't get defined by any particular level, so it could be in every single place. That's why it's so really the Ribuy is a reflection of Achtas Pshuta. Because it's Achtas Pshuta, so therefore even when it comes down to any particular level, it doesn't get limited by that level. But the point over here is, it's not the pshat that it has no shaykhs to any particular level. If you're going to say that l'chatchila, this is spashtos, has no shaykhs to any madregas whatsoever, and therefore it's mispashat bli gvul, so then it remains above, it remains removed from all these levels. That's not the inyan of a ribuy. The inyan of a ribuy is that it befedish comes down to one level, another level, and another level, and each level Gufa says that who am I be'emes? The emes mitzias of this particular level that the Gilui is coming to is really just a reflection of Achtas Pshuta. And the next level also says that this is just a Gilui of Achtas Pshuta. So on one hand, there is Befeidish Ribuy here. There is all these levels that be'emes do exist. Yet at the same time, what is the emes mitzias of all this Ribuy? It's a reflection of Achtas Pshuta. So this is the Shnei Hafachim. This is two opposites at the same time. So b'derech klal, when you talk about a Gilui Elokos, a Gilui of Achtas Hashem, what happens? It negates the mitzias of all the details. It negates all pratim of all levels. Nothing is teifes malkim b'chlal. It's just Achtas Pshuta. But to say the concept of Sfiras Ein Kates, that on one hand there are all these levels, and then each one of these levels, gufa, they should be margish, that what are they be'emes, that they are a reflection of achdas pshuta, so you're saying a combination of two opposites at the same time. Where does that come from? Where do you have such a thing that you could be in the place of a ribui, and yet it should still be achdas pshuta? That's only from the essence of the Eibishter himself. Only from atzmus u'mahos, the very essence of the Eibishter, which exists be'etzem, and therefore is less asar poni minei, and therefore in every single level gufa could be nizgala, this achdas pshuta. So similar to the point that it says, b'negea to ein le'ila v'sibur shekod malay. Just like we say regarding this concept of ein le'ila v'sibur shekod malay, which means that the Eibishter exists be'etzem. He doesn't exist, he's not defined, there's no description that we can give to the Eibishter that something caused this being. And therefore, if something caused him, so then his being is defined by whatever it is that caused his being to exist. No, the Eibishter exists be'etzem. And because he exists be'etzem, so therefore he'll be who he is on every single level. Nothing will limit him, nothing will define the Eibishter. Not only will the Eibishter remain above every single level, even when the Eibishter comes into a yesh, it's still the Eibishter himself. He doesn't get affected by anything because he is be'etzem. So when you have this level of achdas pshuta of the Eibishter where he exists be'etzem, so here you can have the chibur of shnei hafachim. Here you can have the Eibishter which is on one hand achdas pshuta, and yet that achdas pshuta is not going to be defined. It's not going to be defined that the achdas pshuta only exists when there are no levels. How about when there are levels? There the achdas pshuta loses its kayach. No, it's not that way. When you have a achdas pshuta which is sort of defined, so therefore it remains only on the level of achdas pshuta. What if it's emes achdas pshuta? That the Eibishter exists, ein le'ila v'sibur, there's nothing that defines him whatsoever. So then that achdas pshuta could be expressed even in a place of ribui. That the ribui gufa is going to be one with the achdas pshuta. That's the chibur of the shnei hafachim that we're speaking about here. Okay, let's continue inside. Yeah, similar. We learned.
A copy of a copy, but each thing
is this. It is what it is. It doesn't get affected. Correct. So if so, we must say pirish habeis ba'antuchad v'lo b'chushban. So we have a second pshat, a much deeper pshat, in what antuchad v'lo b'chushban is referring to. Kfishim b'vayir ba'maimer. As it's explained in the Maimer of the Friediger Rebbe, Shu b'pchinas ribui b'yoser. When it says lo b'chushban does not refer to the chad, saying that the chad is removed from any cheshbon, like we said before. Now we're teaching lo b'chushban actually refers to the ribui, when there are many levels that come out, and all those levels that come out are ribui b'yoser. It's endless levels that are mispashit. Shaloi be'erech lahacheshbin the esesphiris, and therefore we use the term of lo b'chushban to say that there is the sphiris that are defined to the number of 10, and there it's dafke 10. So that those are sphiris that have a certain definition, a limitation to them. Here, however, we're talking about sphiris, but these sphiris are enkates. They have no definition to them. It's ribui b'yoser. Now the Rebbe adds another point to this to prove this pshat. According to this pshat of Allah b'chushban, since it doesn't refer to the chad itself, it refers to the levels that come out, and on that we're saying Allah b'chushban, that really explains how we could even use this term of Allah b'chushban, that he cannot be calculated. Shemizeh mashma, the very fact that you're saying that he cannot be calculated, what does that mean? Sha'af she'einu begeder shel cheshbon, that even though it's above the whole entire concept of being counted, you must say that there would have been an idea to apply counting to this level. Because if not, then why are you saying v'lo b'chushban? Why are you even negating this? So look, the Rebbe over here on one hand is saying that it's not begeder shel cheshbon, which means not only that you can't count it b'poyel, it's a completely different reality. It's totally removed of cheshbon, but yet it still has to be in a realm where there is a ribui, where there is many, where it's shaykh to the concept of cheshbon. Let's continue inside. If we were to say that v'lo b'chushban is only speaking about Achtos Apshuta of the Eibishter before there's any Ispashtus of any Ribui, and only there we say Allah b'chushban. So over there, on the Etzem Oyer, before there's any Sphiris whatsoever, there's no point in saying V'la b'chushban, that this is something that you can't count. It's like saying, here the Rebbe brings the famous mashal of the Alter Rebbe, Al derech mashakasa b'shar yichud ve'amunah, the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, Shaloi shayach loyma chachma rama v'amuka. You can't say regarding the depth of an idea that this chachma is so deep, sheyev shalamasha b'yadayim, that you can't even touch it with your hands. In no way does that express how deep the Chachma is. In the world of Chachma, there's Lachatchila no concept of mishush, of tangibility. So why are you saying Yev Shalamasha b'yadayim? So too over here, B'negei to V'la b'chushban. Just like B'pashtus, if a person will come and say regarding something that it's not shaykh to say a number, you're going to talk about a color, and you're going to say this color can't be counted. Well, how does color come into counted? One has nothing to do with the other. So you're talking about the Eibishter himself. Achtus pshuta. Achtus pshuta, l'chatchila is not shaykh to ribui. It's not shaykh to any number whatsoever. Not even ribui, not even bligvul. It's just achtus pshuta. It's undefined completely. And here you're saying it can't be counted. It's, the concept of numbers is not shaykh here, b'chla. So why are you saying v'la b'chushban? So again, what's really the oimek advarim? I think that the difference between the two pshatim that the Rebbe is saying here, the first pshat of Antu Chad V'la b'chushban, that V'la b'chushban goes on the chad itself. And the second pshat of V'la b'chushban, that the V'la b'chushban does not go on the chad itself. The V'la b'chushban goes on the ribui that comes out. And at that ribui of Sfiris and Kates that comes out is V'la b'chushban. The difference really is regarding how we look at this Achtus Pshuta coming out. According to the first pshat, so Antu Chad V'la b'chushban, the Eibishter himself is Achtus Pshuta, and he's not shaykh to count, and it's all referring to that Achtus Pshuta of the Eibishter himself above any level of Sfiris whatsoever. How about when there are Sfiris, when there is a level of Ribui that comes out? Here, on this level of the Ribui, you don't see this, you don't sense the Achtus Pshuta in the Ribui. The Achtus Pshuta is removed from the Ribui. That's according to the first pshat. According to the second pshat, the Rebbe is saying, Antu Chad V'la b'chushban. That Antu Chad is expressed also in the V'la b'chushban. And when we say V'la b'chushban, it's not referring to the Chad. It's not referring to the Etzemoyed. It's referring to the Sfiris and Kates. And what we're saying is, these Sfiris and Kates, which are V'la b'chushban, why are they V'la b'chushban? Because of the Chad of the Eibishter. Because they are really a reflection of the Achtus Pshuta of the Eibishter. Therefore, they are V'la b'chushban. So on one hand, we're talking about a level where there's a Ribui, where there are many, many levels. So there is a Metzias besides the Achtus Pshuta L'chayre, and yet that Metzias Gufa, what is it be'emes? This Metzias Gufa is really just a reflection of Achtus Pshuta. So again, like the Rebbe said earlier in the Maimon, the Lashon was Shnei Hafachim. Sfiris and Kates is a combination of Shnei Hafachim. It's two opposites together. Let's see the words inside there. L'chein tzarich lefarish kepirish habeiz anal. So that's why we have to say, like the second pshat, that the Rebbe says over here from Teres Chaim, shaloi b'chushban, when it says loi b'chushban, it doesn't refer to the chad itself. Hanishu b'pchinas ribui b'yoser. It's referring to the hispashtus that comes out with a multitude of levels, endless. And this is shaloi be'erech lahacheshbon desesfiris. And what we're saying here is that this is v'loi b'chushban, unlike the esesfiris that does have a cheshbon, it's defined, but these sfiris are ein kates and they're undefined. Why are they undefined? Because they come from Achtus Pshuta. Because the Achtus Pshuta is present in this level of Sfiris. That's why it's undefined. This concept, this Lashon over here, or the way the Rebbe is explaining this concept of Sfiris and Kates, I looked a little bit in the other Maimonim that speak about this of Ein Kates. I mean, there's endless Maimonim to look at. Ein Kates sources to see this Inyan. But as far as I saw, I didn't see this Lashon of Shnei Afachim in any of these Maimonim that the Rebbe says here, regarding Sfiris and Kates, that it's a combination of two opposites. The Pashto Sfiris and Kates, it's not an Indian of two opposites. What's Sfiris and Kates? Sfiris and Kates is a Gilui of Bligvul, and because it's Bligvul, so it's Lachatchila not Shayach to any particular level. It doesn't relate to any, it doesn't get limited or defined by any level, and therefore it's Ein Kates. There's no Hafachim over here, it's Sfiris and Kates. Right. But here the Rebbe is saying, no, Sfiris and Kates is not just a Gilui of Bligvul, but there's two Hafachim taking place over here. Because if it were just the Achtus Pshuta of the Eibishter, so why is there any musig of Sfiris B'chlal? Sfiris means it is some kind of a Gilui, some particular Gilui, some kind of a spashtus, and there's a ribui levels. There's episode Metzias over here of something. And yet, this Metzias Gufa is Ein Kates. So what is really this concept over here? So what the Rebbe is saying is, the Achtus Pshuta, the way it exists in the source, before it comes down to Sfiris and Kates, so because this is Emes Achtus Pshuta, what does Emes Achtus Pshuta mean? Not that it has to remain removed from levels. Emes Achtus Pshuta means that wherever it is, it remains Achtus Pshuta. It can be anywhere, and it's not going to lose its koyach of Achtus Pshuta because no levels could define it. When you talk about any level of Gilui, even when you talk about the highest level of Gilui Elokus, Keser, or the highest level that says that Welt is bottled b'mitzias because this is such an intense, great Gili Elokus. What does that mean? It's mevatel the mitzias of Elamus. Why? Because it's above these levels. Whatever level you speak about, the very fact that it has to be mevatel the mitzias, so what this means is it also has a definition. It's defined by the fact that it doesn't tolerate any levels. What are those levels, Gufa? Adarabah, it's outside of its Gilui. But when you talk about the Eibishter himself, which is Mechuyev HaMetzias, where he exists be'etzem, and there's nothing that defines him, even when he comes into the Riboy, it's the essence of the Eibishter himself. So therefore, mitzad, the essence of the Eibishter, you have the Achtus Pshuta, and he comes into Spheris. So what happens? The Spheris also, even though it is a Metzias of Spheris, what it seems like the Rebbe is trying to say is, just like you have 10 Spheris, so when you have the Spheris Ein Kates, the 10 Spheris are Metzias of Spheris, the Spheris Ein Kates are also an Inyan of Spheris. It's not the same definition of Spheris, obviously, like the regular Inyan of Spheris, but they're also Inyan of Spheris. And yet, each Spheris says, who am I? I am a reflection of Achtas Pshuta. That's what I am. So if each one feels that I'm a reflection of Achtas Pshuta, so then it's Ein Kates. So on one hand, there's a Metzias of Spheris, and yet at the same time, it's Ein Kates. That's the Chiddush of this Maimer, as far as I can understand. Okay. From this, the Rebbe goes into another Inyan. We can't continue reading this now because it's a whole. It's
Great, my mind is
your mind is already
spinning.
at the max, maxed out.
Is this in any way similar to the concept of Sefer or Mala?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, for sure. So when Chassidus speaks about Soviv, Mamala, and Atzmas, right? So if you want to put it that way. So Mamala Kalama says that each level is Teifis Mokim. There's one level, another level, and each level is different. The Chayis that's here is not there, and so on. That's Mamala. Soviv says it's Makif everything B'Shava. As much as Mamala is a certain limitation, that it's only on one level and not on the other, Soviv is also defined. The very fact that Soviv cannot come into any particular level, the very fact that it's Soviv Makif everything B'Shava means that this is a that's defined by Bli Gvul. This is a concept that Chassidus speaks about, and the Rebbe brings it many times. Bli Gvul is also a definition. The Eibishter himself cannot be defined in any way, not by Gvul, not by Bli Gvul, right?
So we're talking about something which is way...
So here we're talking about Atzmos, the Ein Lo Ilo V'Siba, anything that has a Ilo V'Siba. What's this concept of Ilo V'Siba? Anything that was caused to be brought into being. Why does Alter Rebbe use this lashon of Ilo V'Siba? Thank you very much. In the Sifrei Kabbalah, the term that it uses is Ein L'Tchila. The Eibishter has no beginning. The term Ein L'Tchila is sort of a poor description because Ein L'Tchila means it never had a time that it began. It always existed. So that's sort of you saying in the time. In the frame of time, Ein L'Tchila, he never started at any point. He was always there. Okay, say this. So the Eibishter extends Lamata Adin Kates, Lamayla Adin Tachlis. Ein L'Ilo V'Siba is expressing a much deeper idea, or it really expresses the essence of the idea. There's nothing caused them to be. Anything that's caused to be, so you're defined by what caused you. Because something caused me to be, so I exist, but often of what that mitzias caused me to be. But if I exist be'etzem, so then I'm not a defined mitzias. So then I'm a mitzias, it's mechuyev mitzias. It's a different type of mitzias altogether. Built-in mitzias nimtza. It's a different sug mitzias b'chlal. In our reality of mitzias, we don't know of such a thing b'chlal. So because the Eibishter is not defined in any way whatsoever, so therefore the Eibishter is not defined not by gvul and not by bli gvul. It's not defined by anything. And therefore, by the Eibishter is the Chibur HaFachim. You have Spheris and Kates, which shows the very concept of Spheris and Kates is this Chibur HaFachim. I just heard yesterday a Vart that the Rebbe Rashab once said that the atheists are in a way closer to the Indian of Amunah than people that I forgot who he was comparing the atheists to. But the point he was saying is that atheists, what do they say? This is Nishdakim Mitzias from the Eibishter B'chlal. What do you mean? Why? Because Adarab, there are many people that believe in the Eibishter. Oh, that's what Rashab said. Many people believe in the Eibishter, but their Amunah is B'chlal not Amunah. Why? Because they believe in an Eibishter that exists in our definition of existence. That we see the Eibishter, we see a world the way it exists, and we interpret the existence of reality in a certain way, and then we say, oh, and the Eibishter exists in that type of mitzias. Yeah, Vada, much greater, Godla Vaya, much higher than we could even fathom. But Fart, we in our minds, we say that the Eibishter exists in this sug mitzias of a ilav siba, that something caused it to be. It's a defined mitzias. An atheist that says the Eibishter is nit faran, so what is he saying? In this sug mitzias, the Eibishter is nit faran b'chlal. The Eibishter doesn't exist in this kind of ilu v'siba. It's a different kind of mitzvah. It's a mitzvah be'etzem.
They came to person, put on film. He says, I don't believe this in Abish. She says, the Abish you don't believe in, I don't believe in either.
Yeah. We're learning the Maimer Basi Legani, Toshin Chav Beis. We are in middle of Seiv Dalet. In this kuntris, it's on page Tezvav, 5 lines from the top. So the last point we learned yesterday was about Sfiris Ein Kates, and the Rebbe explained that when it says in the Zohar, Ant Huchad V'lo B'chushban. What's the meaning of that? Ant Huchad refers to the Pshitus, the Achtus Pshuta of the Eibishter himself, before there's any Ispashtus of any Yoyer, before there's any Sfiris. And then when it says V'lo B'chushban, that refers to the Hispashtus of Sfiris Ein Kates, endless numbers of Sfiris. And the Rebbe explains that all of these Sfiris that come out, on one hand, there's a multitude of levels. There's many, endless levels. So that's a ribui. At the same time, though, what is it in essence? It's the Achtas Pshuta of the Eibishter that's reflected in this Bligvul. So V'lo B'chushban is the Antuchad, like the Lashon that the Zohar says. If you look at all the different directions where the light of the candle comes out, what is it really? It's one thing. It's butzine b'luchadai. It's just that achtas pshuta of the source of the candle itself, which is in all of the aspects of the light. So the Rebbe here will bring a similar concept regarding a level which is much further down than this. This is in Atzilus, where you have the same idea. Okay, let's continue inside. We're 5 lines from the top on page Tesvav. V'zeu gam ma shemavua b'teiris chayim sham. This also is similar to what it's explained there in Teiris Chaim, the Mitler Rebbe, Shes Galos Inyan da Antuchad V'lo B'chushban, the revelation of this concept of Antuchad V'lo B'chushban, which is the Achtus Hapshuta, seeing the simple unity of the Eibishter. Einoi Ba'akudim, it's not on the level of Akudim. V'afilu loy Akudim, that is right. V'afilu loy B'nekudim, and not in Akudim either. Aladafke B'brudim, specifically on the level of Brudim. So what's the translation of these things? You know them, right? Akudim, Nekudim, Brudim, I have to translate. Okay, so in Chassidus it explains Akudim is a place where all of the various levels of the spheres are bound up as one. The literal translation of Akudim is bound. Okay, so you have the 10 spheres, for example, right? So they're all bound together in one vessel, and you can't distinguish between one sphere and another sphere. They're unified as one. This is in the source of the spheres before they come out to be distinct spheres, and each one functions separately on its own. In their source, the spheres are there. In the keli, in one keli, so to speak, it's just a mashal. It doesn't literally mean that there's a keli, but it's in one place where all the spheres coexist together and they don't contradict one another. So, for example, chesed and gvura. Chesed and gvura are opposites. It's like fire and water. But in the source, Chesed and Gvura, together with all the other spheres, are bound up together in one keli. How's that possible? What is the pshat that they're bound up together in one keli? Because where is the source of all of these spheres? Let's talk about the way it is in the nefesh of a person. The nefesh of a person has all of these kaiches, Chesed, Gvura, and so on. What's the source of all the kaiches that a person has? The nefesh itself. The nefesh itself does not have any of these distinctions of Chesed and Gvura. The nefesh itself is poshet, is above all of these kaiches, the essence of the nefesh, right? Now, because the essence of the nefesh has the shleimus of what a nefesh has, and therefore it could express itself in any way, so therefore it has the power to express itself through chesed, it could express itself through gvura. But when all of these kaiches are in their source, within the nefesh itself, so chesed is not recognized for being something which has the ma'ila of chesed dafke, or gvura has the ma'ila of gvura dafke. That's not the point of each one of these kaiches. In the source, each one of these kaiches are another aspect of the expression of the nefesh. They're there as a shleimus of the nefesh. So if chesed is there as an expression of the nefesh, and gvura is there as an expression of the nefesh, so what do you sense in chesed and gvura? You sense in them their own nature? No, what you sense in them is the fact that each one of them is another way to express what the nefesh wants. If that's the case, they're not a contradiction to each other. They coexist. Adarabba, they're bound up together in one keli. Because again, the point is that all that you sense in that place, in the source, is the nefesh itself. And the nefesh itself is higher than any of these divisions. That's akudim. Then nekudim, usually in Chassidus, nekudim actually refers to Eilam Atoyu. Eilam Atoyu, nekudim literally means when you have an akudah. One nekuda, another nekuda, another nekuda. When you have an nekuda, a point, and another point, and another point, these points never meet with one another. Right? When you have a circle, so then it unites everything in the circle together. If you have a line, so the beginning of the line and the end of the line are connected to one another. The word nekudim is a code word for toyu. Why? Because toyu is where you had chesed with its fullest might, and gvura with its fullest might, and they can't coexist with one another. They can't tolerate one another. Chesed says that the nefesh has to be expressed dafken oifen of chesed, and gvura says that no, the nefesh has to be expressed dafken oifen of gvura, and they can't come together. They can't tolerate one another. So over here, Adarab, I mean, in a way, the reason why they can't tolerate one another is because each midah feels very, very strongly its connection to its source, and because of its connection to its source, it feels like I'm it. The nefesh wants only chesed, and therefore it doesn't know of anything else. The gvura feels its connection to its source and says the nefesh wants only gvura. So how can they coexist? That's the concept of Toya, where it says that all the iris that were there were very strong revelations, and each one can't tolerate one another. Okay, and then you have brudim. Brudim literally means when you have these spots that are not just nekudis, that are separate from one another, but just like the lashon of brudim that's brought over there by the story with Yaakov and Lavan with the animals, and you have these spots that are on the skin of the animal, that the spots meet one another and they blend with one another. So brudim refers to the spheres in the world of Atzilus, or what's also usually called in Chassidus, Olam HaTikon. In Olam HaTikon, so you have 10 spheres, and each one of these 10 spheres are separate from one another. However, they could function with one another. They could coexist with one another. In the world of Atzilus, so that's what Olam HaTikon is. Olam HaTikon is on one hand, each one of the spheres is in their place. It's not like the world of Akudim. In the world of Akudim, over there, the spheres are l'chatchila not recognized b'chlal as a metzius. If you take it back to the source, so chesed and gvura, the way they exist in the source, they don't have the chatchila, their own metzius that's recognized that there should be a contradiction in the first place. There is no reason for a contradiction. In the source of Akudim, each one of the spheres is more nafshiyizdik. It's just the soul itself that you feel over there. You don't feel the distinct nature of this particular sphere that's a contradiction to another sphere. It's like, imagine you can take fire and water, but you take it back to its source of what it is before it gets its particular properties when it comes down to be physical fire and water. In its source, fire and water don't have to contradict one another. The fire doesn't have to burn the water doesn't have to extinguish the fire. In the source, it's something that's much more subtle. They're not a contradiction to one another. That's in Akudim. However, how is it in Brudim? Brudim is where you do have individual spheres, like it is in the world of Atzilus. There are individual spheres of Chesed, Gvura, and so on. However, they blend with one another. This is what's known as Chesed Shebegvura, Gvura Shebechesed, when they are included and blend with one another, and they're mashlim one another. So what's the Rebbe saying here from Teres Chaim? Where do you have the expression of the true Achdus Pshuta of the Eibishter? So the Rebbe says, not in Akudim, and not in Nikudim either, Dafke and Brudim. That's the true expression of the Achdus Pshuta of the Eibishter. What's the reason for this? Why Dafke and Brudim is the Achdus Pshuta? We can understand why not in Nikudim. Nikudim is where each sphere is a Nikudah for itself, and they don't blend with one another. Over there, Adarabah, Chesed feels that he's the only thing. Gvura feels that he's the only thing. So over there, Nikudim, obviously they're not blending with one another. But L'chayre, in Akudim, where all the spheres are bound up in one keli, isn't the real Achdus of the Eibishter expressed in the world of Akudim much more than it is in Brudim, where the spheres are distinct, but they blend with one another? So what's the pshat in this?
Brudim means blend with?
Yeah, basically. I mean, Brudim is when, like I said, the spots that spread out and blend with one another. So the Rebbe gives a mashal the way it is b'koiches hanefesh. It's very bekitzeri. I'll try to explain what the Rebbe is saying. So the example for this in the koiches of a person is Shamit is in skalalos, where do you have the real concept of inclusion of one another? And to the extent that this kind of inclusion and unity that there is in these midis is expressing the simple unity of the Eibishter himself, where do you have that? You don't have this in the koiches hiyuliyim shebenefesh. Koiches hiyuliyim is where you have the koiches in the nefesh itself in their potential state before it's developed into being actual koiches. As I mentioned, the concept of akudim is the nefesh itself. The nefesh itself is really simple. It doesn't have any of these koiches. It's the essence of the nefesh before there's any koiches. Then there's also the koiches that are within the nefesh itself in their potential state. That's koiches hiyulim shebenefesh. So the Rebbe says in the koiches hiyulim shebenefesh, seemingly over here, because the koiches are in their potential state and therefore they're not distinct from one another, so the unity between them within the nefesh is very powerful. They're all bound up. This mashal of koiches hiyulim shebenefesh is the mashal for akudim, where you have all the spheres l'mayla all bound up together. So the Rebbe says no. Over there in the koiches hiyulim shebenefesh, that does not express the achtas pshuta of the Eibishter. And also not in the koiches of the nefesh, once they are actual koiches, not koiches hiyuliyim, but the koiches of the nefesh. And then you have the koiches of the nefesh that come out of the source, mispashtem, they spread out and they come out of the source from the nefesh itself, before they become enclosed in individual limbs of the body. Every koyach of the nefesh has a particular limb in the body that corresponds to that koyach. The koyach hariyah, koyach hashmiyah, or the chesed and gvura and so on. It has different, there's the chalal hayamani of the lay, the chalal asmali and so on. Each koyach has a particular place in the guf where it comes into. So over there, once the koyches come out of their source, before they come into the particular place in the guf, that you don't have the achtas pshuta of the Eibishter expressed there either. Elo, rather, daf galach reshabom bis chalkos lekama chalokim beguf. Specifically, after you have the koiches of the person, of the nefesh, that comes out in divisions, in many different levels. And not only in many different levels, but it actually enters into a particular keli, in a particular place in the guf of the person. So we have over here all the koiches in their potential form, where you can't even recognize the koiches for what they are. They're not even distinct at all. Then you have the oir of all of these koiches, where it comes out into particular koiches, but they don't have their own keli yet. They haven't been enclosed in a particular limb in the body. There's no kelim yet for these koiches. And then you finally have, when it comes down fully developed and fully distinct of one another, it comes down in a particular aver in the guf of the person. So hazai dafke then nasis eskalas hakoiches zeh mizeh. It's there where you have the inclusion and the unity of one koyach with the other. Va'adle eskalos betachlis. Here, this eskalos is the absolute highest level of unity, the ultimate level of unity. Va'adle achtas apshuta. This is an expression of the simple unity of the Eibishter himself. Dafka over here in the lowest level, once it comes out into the kelim. Why is this? What's the pshat in this? Why do you have over here achtas apshuta? Dafka when it comes down into the lowest level. So it doesn't explain it here clearly, but l'chayre the pshat over here is, what's the difference between achtos and achtos hapshuta? The Rebbe keeps on saying here that only in Brudim do you have achtos hapshuta, simple unity, meaning there's unity which is not pshuta, and there's achtos which is pshuta. What's the difference between achtos and achtos hapshuta? The difference is when you have achtos that's not pshuta, that's a kind of achtos where you have a revelation from a higher source, from the nefesh itself in this case, from a higher revelation of the Eibishter himself, and therefore that negates all levels. It negates all details, and all the distinct levels of the spheres are not recognized b'chlal to be a metzius. So therefore there's a tremendous achtos here. All there is the revelation of the Eibishter. But that's not achtos pshuta. Why is that not Achdus Pshuta? Because this is such a kind of Achdus. When you come into the place where there is a tzir of one sfira, another sfira, there it doesn't have that Achdus. Over there, the Achdus can't reach into that place where there is distinct spheres. This is a level of Achdus that's defined, has a certain gather, which is what? That it has to remain above the particular individual levels of the spheres. That's how this Achdus is expressed. That's not Achdus Pshuta. That's an Achdus that's defined to a specific kind of way, that it's revealed above all these spheres. Mashenk and Achdus Pshuta, the essence of the Eibishter himself, where no levels affect him. The Eibishter himself is the Mechuyev HaMetzias, the Eibishter himself, which is the true essence of everything. And therefore he doesn't get affected by any levels. Even when that Achdus of the Eibishter enters into the individual levels, you will recognize the Achdus Pshuta of the Eibishter. Even there, when you do have the Kaychis that are separate from one another, you'll still see the Achdus of the Eibishter there. That's the Emes Achdus Pshuta. When it comes to Achdus Pshuta, it doesn't have to negate the individual levels. Adarabba. That Achdus Pshuta will be revealed even within the individual levels. So therefore, what's the Rebbe saying here? When you come to the level of Akudim, which is in the source, before the details of the Kaychis of Bechlal developed, so over there, why is there an Achdus? Why is there an Achdus between these Kaychis? Because the Kaychis are not developed yet. The Kaychis, each one of the Kaychis doesn't have their own opinion in the first place. When you're in a presence of greatness, it's al derech the mashal that Chassidus always brings, Oster Shalom ben Brayimov. When you have the ministers, each one of them is assigned to their own position, and they're very different from one another, and one minister is pulling in one direction, and another minister is pulling the other direction. Each one wants their department to be more successful, and they sort of detract from one another. When they come and they stand in the presence of the king, so here they're not going to argue with one another. Here they realize that in the presence of the king, we're just here to serve the king. We don't have our own we don't have any autonomy, we don't have our own department that belongs to us. Right? So what's the pshat? Over here, they lose their opinion. They have nothing to say. In the presence of the king, they can't speak up. Right? So over there, what's the pshat of the Achdus? The Achdus is that you're taking away their metzias, you're bringing them to a higher place, and in the presence of greatness, your metzias is non-existent. That's one level of Achdus, but that's not Achdus Pshuta. Achdus Pshuta means even when each one of these ministers, or over here, even when you have each one of these kaychis developed, fully developed, so much so that each one has its own keli, its own place, and yet you see an inclusion from one another. What's the pshat in this inclusion? Why do you have an inclusion from one another over here? Because this is the Achdus Pshuta of the Eibishter. This shows you how far the Achdus of the Eibishter penetrates. It comes down even to a place where there's a mitzias of these kaychis. Still there's the Achdus of the Eibishter here. That's a much deeper level of Achdus. And it's also, there's another point to this, it's also bepashtus. Take the example of Chesed and Gvura. You could see it's a different kind of Achdus. The Achdus in Akudim. And the Achdus in the level of Berudim, once it comes into individual Kalim, it's a different type of Achdus. When you have the Achdus in the source, so over there, there's Chesed, there's Gvura, and Chesed can be together with Gvura. They're not a contradiction to one another. Why could Chesed be together with Gvura? Because Chesed, mitzad, what Chesed is, needs Gvura? No, Chesed doesn't need Gvura. Adarab, Chesed senses that Chesed's not a Metzias really. What's the real Metzias? The source that's above Chesed. So Mamela, Chesed doesn't get excited about what it needs. The self-expression of Chesed is not so strong. So therefore it can tolerate Gvura as well. So why is it tolerating Gvura? Because Chesed itself recognizes Gvura? No, the moment you bring Chesed for a Metzias for itself, it will not recognize Gvura. The reason it's tolerating Gvura is because Chesed is magish that I don't exist Bechlal. So Mamelis still saying Gvura Eichet. Right? That's in the source in Akudim. Whereas when it comes out into Berudim, into the Kaychas HaNefesh, there's a tremendous Chiddush in the Hiskalulos of Chesed Shebe Gvura and Gvura Shebe Chesed. There's a tremendous Chiddush here. In order for a person to be a Baal Chesed B'Shleimus, you have to have Gvura Shebe Chesed. If you're not going to have Gvura Shebe Chesed, what's the problem? There's something lacking in your Chesed. Not only is it that there's a different sphere that I don't have, no, the sphere of Chesed itself is lacking. For example, what's Gvura Shebe Chesed? If a person is disciplining a child, he's a father and he disciplines a child, that's Gvura Shebe Chesed. Right? So it's an act of Gvura. But where does it come from? It comes from the love that you have, because you love your child so much, so you want him to behave, you want him to be a mensch, so you have Gvura Shebe Chesed. What happens if a person has only chesed for his child and there's no gvura of chesed whatsoever? Just pure chesed. What happens? You can there's an expression that love itself could too much love. I forgot the expression right now in English. That if you have too much love as well, it could also squash the child. Right? So if there has to be gvura b'chesed. So here, what's the hiskalus? The unity and the hiskalus that there is between chesed and gvura. What's the pshat in this hiskalus? Chesed itself recognizes that it needs gvura. That's a tremendous chiddush. The pashtos, chesed and gvura are opposites. Chesed has nothing to do with gvura, and gvura has nothing to do with chesed. They don't know from each other, b'chlal. Chesed doesn't know what this concept of gvura is, and it's the same thing vice versa. Over here, mitamol, when it comes into the kaiches of the person, you see that there's a hiskalos that chesed recognizes that if I'm not going to have gvura, the chesed is going to be lacking. Not only I'm lacking gvura, but actually chesed itself is not b'shleimus. Why is that? This is the emissa hiskalus of achtus pshuta. Hiskalus betachlis. This lashon that the Rabbi here says, hiskalus betachlis. What are these words? Hiskalus betachlis means. There's a hiskalus where one individual recognizes that there's someone else that has a milah that I don't have, and therefore there's a benefit that I can get from someone else. Okay, but so that's a certain level of hiskalus, but mitzad who I am b'shleimus. Elamai, there's a milah that someone else has that I have to be hiskalus with him. There's a certain milah that he has that I don't have. But me mitzad my milah, he's not mashlim my milah, he doesn't complete me. There's a different milah that I could be b'achdus with him. Hiskalus betachlis means a different thing. Hiskalus betachlis means you recognize that even you mitzad the milah that you have, your milah is lacking until you become included with someone else. He's mashlim your milah. Chesed and gvura that are kolul from one another. What's the achdus of chesed shebegvura and gvura shebechesed? It's a skalus betachlis. Chesed feels like that the chesed is lacking before you bring gvura into it. And the same thing, gvura feels like if I want to have chesed, my gvura is not b'shleimus. From where does this come from? What's the source of this kind of eskalos where each individual midah is margish that it can't be b'shleimus unless it has the other midah in it? The pashtus, these two midas are opposites. The answer is, this is the achtus pshuta of the Eibishter. Because mitzad the achtus pshuta, it's not only achtus above all the levels, it's achtus within all the levels. So dafka over here, mitzad the achtus pshuta, you could be margish, this absolute hiskalus within every single level that exists. That's the chiddush of Brudim.
This is what we say, Adin Tachlis. This is the pshat.
Yeah, this is the Adin Tachlis. Yeah. One of the pratim of Adin Tachlis.
Unity with Hashem himself?
Yeah. The essence of the Eibishter himself. Okay, so the Nekudas Inyan, the Rebbe is bringing this here just as an example for the Sfiras and Kates. Just like by Sfiras and Kates, so the Rebbe said before, there are Shnei Afachim, there are two opposites here, which is that on one hand you have a Ribui, you have many levels. And at the same time, though, what's the essence of all those many levels? It's really Achdus Pshuta. It's the same thing also with the Kaiches on a much lower level. Even when you see the division of the Kaiches, and each Kaiches is in its own individual place, and yet you see the Hiskalulos. What is this Hiskalulos be'emes? It's Achdus Pshuta. The fact that these Kaiches could have this level of unity between one another, it's an expression of Achdus Pshuta. It's the same point, similar point to what we learned before. That's what the Rebbe is bringing this here. Let's include the Aise or the paragraph here. So this is the point that the Friedrich Rebbe is saying here. What does it mean that the revelation of Eirin Seif extends down? It goes Adin Tachlis, the revelation of the Eir, who b'pchinas ein Seifu bli gvul. It comes out with endless levels. This is the Sfiris and Kates. He's going back to the main point that he spoke about in this paragraph, when you have the revelation of Sfiris and Kates. The expression that it says in Idrei Zayar is l'chol star v'iber, that it goes to every side and every direction. That's just an emotional for Ein Kates. So because this is a revelation of the Ein Seif and Bli Gvul, Nasim Eilumis Sfiris ad Ein Kates. So therefore this brings about the creation of Eilumis and Sfiris ad Ein Kates, because they come from this Eir, which is Ein Kates. So the Chiddush that the Rebbe said in this paragraph is that it's not only connected to the Koyach of Ein Seif, but it's actually connected to Achdus Pshuta. Achdus Pshuta, or even more than that, to the essence of the Eibishter, which is Ein Leitchila. I explained this already yesterday, that this whole Indian that Achtas Pshuta could come down in such a low place is only because the Eibishter is not defined by anything. And therefore it's expressed in the Sfiris Enkates and in the Kaiches HaNefesh when they come down, even in their Tzir, they have their Skalus Betachlis. That's the Kud of the Indian there. Okay. Simple in, you know?
Clear as mud.
What do you say?
Clear as mud.